Zix-7's three-chambered heart raced with an intensity that surprised even the young data analyst. The neural dampeners built into their cranial implant should have suppressed such emotional fluctuations, yet something about the planetary scan before them defied all logical protocols. The holographic display flickered with intricate data streams, each wavelength meticulously color-coded to represent different types of planetary information. Most survey worlds were predictably mundane. Uniform geological patterns, simplistic atmospheric compositions, primitive electromagnetic signatures that spoke of barely developed technological civilizations. This world was different. Earth's data signature was chaotic. No, that wasn't the right word. Chaotic implied randomness. This was something else entirely. A complex, almost living network of information that seemed to pulse and shift with an organic unpredictability that made Zix-7's neural pathways tingle with an emotion dangerously close to excitement. Anomaly detected, Zix-7 murmured, their translation implant automatically converting the thought into the standardized communication protocol of the Zarkonian Imperium. But even that felt inadequate. The word anomaly suggested a minor deviation, a statistical outlier. This was something more profound. The planetary scan revealed multiple layers of complexity that defied standard categorization. Multiple overlapping communication networks, some wireless, some physical, some using technologies the Zarkonian database couldn't immediately classify. Electromagnetic signatures that seemed to change millisecond by millisecond. Computational systems that appeared primitive by Zarkonian standards, yet demonstrated a flexibility that was almost adaptive. Zix-7 knew the risks of presenting unusual findings. The Imperium's bureaucratic structure was not kind to junior analysts who challenged established narratives. But something compelled them to dig deeper. A supplementary scan revealed additional layers of complexity. The planet's inhabitants, humans as they called themselves, seemed to operate on principles that defied the standard xenological models. Their technological development was wildly uneven. In one geographical region, they possessed rudimentary, quantum computing capabilities. In another, they still relied on combustion-based transportation. Their global communication networks displayed a level of redundancy and adaptability that was almost organic in nature. Most intriguing were the biological markers. Humans demonstrated a genetic plasticity that was unprecedented in the Imperium's database. Their ability to adapt, to modify their own environment, to recover from systemic disruptions. It was almost like watching a living organism rather than a technological civilization. Zix-7 knew what the standard report would look like. A simple classification, pre-stellar civilization, minimal threat potential, recommended immediate colonization. The words were already forming in the standardized report template, ready to be submitted to Admiral Kralix. But something held them back. The last time Zix-7 had hesitated like this was during the Vexarian survey, where their preliminary caution had saved an entire fleet from a quantum phase trap. The memory of that commendation still resonated through their professional record. With trembling appendages, Zix-7 began to compile a more detailed report. Not a rejection of the standard assessment, but an addendum. A warning. The communication terminal in the analysis chamber was silent save for the soft quantum pulse of data processing. Zix-7 knew the risks. Junior analysts who questioned established protocols rarely advanced in the Imperium's strict hierarchical structure. Deviation was not just discouraged, it was systematically eliminated. A final cross-reference confirmed Zix-7's suspicions. The planet's inhabitants displayed a statistical improbability of adaptive response that was unprecedented. Their technological development showed exponential, non-linear progression. Their ability to integrate new technologies to communicate across complex and seemingly chaotic networks suggested something beyond mere technological capability. It suggested potential. The report was perfect, precise, documented, annotated, with multiple layers of supporting data. A comprehensive case for caution. Admiral Kralix would never read it. As Zix-7 entered the communication chamber to present the findings, they knew the outcome was already predetermined. The massive, battle-scarred admiral would dismiss the report with a wave of his cybernetic appendage. Another world. Another conquest. The Zarkonian Imperium had conquered hundreds of civilizations. What could possibly be different about this? 1. Everything, Zix-7 thought. Absolutely everything. The first wave of Zarkonian antimatter bombardment turned Fort Carson into a smoking crater of molten earth and vaporized infrastructure. Plasma-based energy weapons carved through military defenses like they were tissue paper, leaving nothing but superheated destruction in their wake. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez came to consciousness beneath a collapsed communications bunker, her tactical augment still flickering with the last fragments of tactical data. Blood trickled from her temple, mixing with dust and fragments of advanced ceramic armor. Around her, the remnants of her Special Operations Unit lay scattered, some moving, some not. "Anyone alive?" She croaked into her damaged comm unit. Weak response came from her left. Jack Harper, their unit's tech specialist, was dragging himself from beneath a fallen communications array. His right leg was a mess of torn muscle and scorched fabric, but his eyes burned with an intensity that defied his physical condition. "Comms are down," Harper muttered, already pulling a compact electronics kit from his belt. But not for long. Nearby, Dr. Elena Nakamura, a civilian quantum physicist who had been embedded with the Special Operations Team for a classified research project, was doing something that would have seemed impossible moments before. She was systematically dismantling a piece of fallen Zarkonian drone technology, her hands moving with a surgeon's precision. "We're not dead," Dr. Nakamura said, her voice calm and clinical. "Which means they're not as advanced as their initial attack suggests." Sergeant Rodriguez would have laughed if it didn't hurt so much. A quantum physicist and a half-destroyed tech specialist were going to be their last line of defense against an alien invasion that had just turned the entire front line into a radioactive wasteland. Harper's fingers danced across the alien tech, his cybernetic neural interface struggling to make sense of the completely foreign technological architecture. "It's not just a communication system," he muttered. "It's more like a neural network, organic, adaptive." Dr. Nakamura nodded. "Biological computing, far more advanced than our current understanding, but with fundamental weaknesses we can exploit." The ground shook. Another wave of Zarkonian. Dropships were descending, their massive silhouettes blocking out the smoke-filled sky. Humanoid battle units began to emerge, 15-foot-tall biomechanical constructs that moved with a precision that suggested they were more machine than living creature. "We need a plan," Sergeant Rodriguez said, checking her weapon, a standard-issue rifle that now seemed laughably primitive against the alien technology. Harper's eyes gleamed. "I might have something." The captured communication array began to transform under his hands. What had been an alien piece of technology was being rapidly repurposed, its intricate quantum circuitry being reconfigured in ways its original designers could never have anticipated. "They're using a quantum entanglement communication protocol," Harper explained, his voice taking on a manic edge of excitement. "Which means if we can understand the base frequency, we can potentially—" A massive explosion interrupted him. One of the Zarkonian battle units suddenly went critical, its energy systems collapsing in a spectacular display of quantum instability. Dr. Nakamura allowed herself a small smile. "Quantum systems are beautiful. They're also incredibly fragile. If you know where to apply pressure." The battlefield was transforming. What should have been a simple invasion was becoming something else entirely. The Zarkonians had expected a straightforward conquest. Instead, they were facing something they could not comprehend. Humans who refused to follow any expected pattern of resistance. Sergeant Rodriguez looked at her unlikely team. A wounded special ops soldier, a tech specialist who seemed to be speaking an entirely different technological language, a quantum physicist who saw the alien invasion as nothing more than an interesting scientific problem to solve. "We're going to need more coffee," she muttered. Harper laughed. a sound of pure, slightly unhinged human defiance. The first day of the invasion was ending, but the real war was just beginning, and the Zarkonians had no idea what was coming. The underground research facility beneath the Sandia National Laboratories looked like something between a mad scientist's playground and the most advanced technological workshop in human history. Concrete walls were covered with holographic displays. Alien technology hung from custom-designed mounting brackets, and the air hummed with the kind of creative energy that could reshape reality. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned over a partially disassembled Zarkonian energy weapon, her augmented reality glasses casting intricate quantum diagrams across her field of vision. Beside her, a team of researchers from 6 different countries worked in a symphony of technological improvisation that would have been impossible just weeks ago. "It's not just about copying," she muttered, more to herself than to her colleagues. "It's about understanding the fundamental language of their technology." Dr. Akira Tanaka, a robotics expert from Tokyo, had been working on the alien communication array captured during the initial invasion. "Look at this," he called out, bringing up a holographic representation of the device's internal structure. "Their communication isn't just electronic, it's quasi-organic. These neural pathways, they're not circuits. They're more like living networks." Major Jack Chen, sitting at a nearby workstation covered in an impossible array of computer monitors, chuckled. Living networks that were about to completely repurpose. The room was a testament to human capability, where the Zarkonians saw their technology as absolute, immutable. The human team saw it as a puzzle waiting to be solved. A captured alien battlesuit stood in the corner, already modified with human innovations that would have been unimaginable just days before. Dr. Rodriguez's primary focus was the energy weapon. Zarkonian technology operated on principles of quantum entanglement that should have been impossible to reverse engineer. But impossibility was a concept humans treated as more of a suggestion than a hard rule. "The quantum resonance chamber," she explained to a group of young researchers, "isn't just a power source. It's a communication device. They're transmitting energy and information simultaneously." A young engineer named Marcus Lopez spoke up. "So we're not just talking about converting an energy weapon. We're talking about turning it into a communication jammer that can speak the alien's own technological language." "Exactly," Dr. Rodriguez grinned. The first prototype took shape over the next 72 hours. What had been a weapon capable of vaporizing entire city blocks was now a device that could potentially disrupt the entire Zarkonian communication network. Major Chen's cyber warfare team had been working in parallel. They'd discovered that the alien neural networks had a fundamental weakness. They prioritized efficiency over adaptability. Human communication networks, by contrast, were messy, redundant, full of unnecessary complexity that now proved to be their greatest strength. "They communicate like a perfect machine," Chen explained. "We communicate like a living organism." A breakthrough came unexpectedly. Dr. Rodriguez realized that the quantum entanglement principles in the Zarkonian technology could be manipulated using a combination of quantum computing and something entirely human: creative unpredictability. "It's like they built a perfect chess computer," she told the team. "And we're about to introduce a player who doesn't know the rules of chess." The first test of the modified communication jammer was nothing short of miraculous. When activated, it didn't just disrupt the Zarkonian signals. It began to learn from them, to mimic them, to create a kind of technological white noise that was simultaneously a weapon and a method of communication. "We're not just fighting," Major Chen said, watching the initial test results. "We're translating." Outside the facility, the world was changing. Military bases that had been destroyed were being rebuilt using captured alien technology. Communication networks were being reinforced with quantum-level redundancies. Every piece of Zarkonian technology that fell into human hands became something new, something unexpected. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the modified energy weapon. Now, a communication device that could potentially reach across star systems. The Zarkonians had come to conquer. Instead, they had provided humanity with its greatest technological leap forward. "I almost want to thank them," she muttered. The team laughed. The war was far from over, but for the first time humanity wasn't just defending, they were transforming. Marcus Holloway had been a high school history teacher before the invasion. Now he was the most dangerous prisoner in the Zarkonian detention complex, not because of any physical threat, but because of something far more potent: his mind. The interrogation chamber was a marvel of alien psychological engineering. Neural inhibitors lined the walls. Quantum state emotion dampeners hummed with a soft, almost imperceptible frequency. The Zarkonian interrogators, biomechanical entities designed to extract information with mathematical precision, believed they had created the perfect environment for breaking any sentient being. They had no idea what they were dealing with. So, Marcus began, adjusting himself in the restraint field. Do you guys have a cafeteria in this place? The food's gotta be better than the last conference I attended at the school district. The lead interrogator, designated NX9, a being with 3 separate neural processing units and enough cybernetic augmentation to make a supercomputer look primitive, paused. Its communication protocols had no subroutine for handling this type of response. You will provide information about human defensive capabilities, NX9 stated. It was not a request. It was not a question. It was a command. Marcus laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a defeated laugh. But a genuine deep belly laugh that seemed to momentarily short-circuit the neural inhibitors. Which defensive capabilities? He asked. The ones in Colorado? The Pacific Fleet? Or the high school debate team I used to coach? Because let me tell you, those kids could negotiate their way out of anything. NX9's neural processors began to heat up. Somewhere in its complex decision-making matrix, something was going wrong. Across the planet, similar scenarios were playing out. Human prisoners weren't just resisting. They were actively destabilizing the Zarkonian interrogation systems through pure, unpredictable human communication. In another detention center, a retired stand-up comedian named Sarah Chen was turning her interrogation into an impromptu comedy routine that was systematically breaking down the aliens' communication protocols. Every joke, every seemingly random anecdote was a carefully constructed psychological weapon. You know, Sarah told her interrogators, this reminds me of my last divorce hearing, except you guys are way less intimidating. The global resistance had discovered something profound. The Zarkonian communication and interrogation systems were built on pure logic. They expected linear responses, predictable emotional patterns, standardized resistance protocols. Humans did not work that way. Marcus continued his one-man psychological assault. He talked about his students, about the time his debate team won a national championship, about his mother's terrible cooking, about anything and everything except what the interrogators wanted to know. I once had a student, he said, who could argue both sides of any debate so convincingly that the judges would get confused. I'm getting that same feeling right now. NX9's neural systems were beginning to overheat. The interrogation protocols were designed to break down resistance through systematic psychological pressure. But Marcus wasn't resisting. He was something far more dangerous. He was engaging. Underground resistance movements around the world were weaponizing this approach. Social media networks transformed into intelligence-gathering platforms. Memes became psychological warfare tools. The very communication systems the Zarkonians sought to suppress became their greatest vulnerability. A teenager in Mumbai created an algorithm that could generate millions of meaningless, but technically complex communication patterns. A group of linguists in São Paulo developed communication codes that mimicked human conversation, but contained zero actual information. In Seattle, a collective of improvisational actors began broadcasting random, emotionally complex narratives that completely scrambled alien communication frequencies. The Zarkonians had expected a straightforward conquest. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that didn't just resist, an enemy that played by rules they could not comprehend. Want to hear about the time I got detention in high school? Marcus asked NX9, his eyes twinkling with a combination of defiance and genuine amusement. The interrogation had been going on for hours. To the Zarkonians, it felt like centuries, and they hadn't learned a single thing. The United Nations General Assembly had never seen anything like this emergency session. The massive circular hall, usually a place of diplomatic posturing and carefully measured statements, had transformed into something entirely new. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the Nigerian representative, stood at the podium. Behind her, holographic displays showed real-time data from every continent, military movements, technological developments, resistance strategies. Her dark eyes swept across the assembly, cutting through generations of diplomatic pretense. "We are no longer separate nations," she began, her voice resonating through simultaneous translation systems. "We are a single planetary organism, fighting for survival." The words hung in the air, more powerful than any weapon. To her left, the Russian delegation, traditionally positioned in opposition to Western powers, nodded. The Chinese representative, who would have never considered such a collaborative approach mere weeks ago, was actively sharing classified defense technologies with the American team. In the observation gallery, a group of civilian experts watched. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the quantum physicist who had been reverse engineering alien technology, sat beside Major Jack Chen. They were no longer just researchers. They were planetary strategists. "Look," Chen pointed to a display showing global communication networks. The lines connecting different nations no longer showed traditional diplomatic boundaries. Instead, they formed a complex living network that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. Outside the UN headquarters, something unprecedented was happening. Cities that had been traditional rivals were sharing resources. Silicon Valley tech companies were working directly with military research facilities in China. Agricultural experts from Brazil were collaborating with Russian climate scientists to develop sustainable defense strategies. In Mumbai, a group of teenage hackers worked alongside military cyber warfare specialists. In Tokyo, robotics engineers were creating defense systems that combined technologies from a dozen different countries. A research facility in Cape Town became a global hub for alien technology adaptation, with scientists from every continent working in real-time collaboration. The invasion had done what decades of diplomacy could not. It had unified humanity. Dr. Okonkwo continued her speech. "Our differences are our strength. Our diversity is our weapon." The aliens expected a fractured, competitive species. Instead, they will find a united planetary defense. A holographic display showed the transformation. Traditional military supply lines had been completely redesigned. Communication networks now operated on principles of maximum redundancy and adaptability. Every technological innovation was immediately shared across global platforms. "We're not just defending," Elena Rodriguez muttered to Chen. "We're evolving." The most remarkable transformation was happening at the human level. Social media platforms that had once been sources of division now became real-time global coordination systems. Language barriers dissolved as translation technologies improved. Cultural differences became sources of strategic innovation rather than conflict. A team of anthropologists discovered something remarkable. The global response to the alien invasion was creating a new form of human identity. Not American, not Chinese, not Russian, but something entirely new. Planetary. In schools across the world, curriculum changed overnight. History classes became studies of global resilience. Science classes transformed into collaborative problem-solving workshops. Children who would have never spoken to each other were now sharing real-time strategies for planetary defense. The UN session continued, but it was no longer just a diplomatic meeting. It was a war council, a planetary strategy session, a reimagining of human potential. Dr. Okonkwo's final words echoed through the hall and across global communication networks. "We did not choose this war, but we will define its outcome." Outside, the first rays of a new dawn broke across the planet. Humanity stood not as a collection of nations, but as a single, unified organism. The Zarkonian Imperium had come to conquer a planet. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species discovering its true potential. The Australian outback had always been a place of survival. Now it became the epicenter of humanity's most unconventional warfare. Senior Tracker. William Jarrah moved silently across the red earth, his indigenous tracking skills merging seamlessly with cutting-edge military technology. Quantum communication. Devices were strapped to his body, custom designed by a team of Silicon Valley engineers and Aboriginal technology specialists. Each step was a calculation, each movement a potential weapon. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Chen, a computational ecologist from the University of Melbourne, monitored a holographic display that looked more like a living ecosystem than a traditional battle map. Their supply lines, she muttered, are like circulatory systems. We're not just going to break them, we're going to make them collapse. The Zarkonian invasion had created something unprecedented, a global defense network that defied every traditional concept of military engagement. Where previous human conflicts had been about territory and resources, this was something entirely different. Total planetary adaptation. In the mountains of Adia, Peru, a team of environmental engineers used captured alien terrain modification technology to create geological disruptions that would make traditional supply routes impossible. Climate scientists in Siberia developed atmospheric manipulation techniques that could create localized weather patterns to interfere with alien troop movements. It's not about fighting, Dr. Chen explained to the Special Operations team. It's about creating an environment where they cannot survive. William Jarrah's tracking skills proved to be more valuable than any advanced sensor technology. He could read the landscape in ways the Zarkonians could never understand. Every disturbance in the soil, every broken branch, every microscopic change became part of a complex information network. Their primary target was a critical Zarkonian supply node, a massive quantum energy transfer station that powered their invasion fleet's ground operations. But they weren't going to attack it directly. That would be too simple, too predictable. Instead, they were going to make it impossible to exist. A global network of hackers, environmental scientists, military strategists, and indigenous tracking experts worked in real-time collaboration. They weren't just gathering intelligence. They were transforming the entire planetary ecosystem into a living, adaptive defense mechanism. Quantum communication devices allowed instantaneous sharing of tactical information. But it was more than just data transmission. It was a form of collective intelligence that the Zarkonians had never encountered. "Look," William said, pointing to a nearly invisible disturbance in the red dirt. "They've moved through here, but not how they think they have." The Special Operations team watched as he began to reconstruct an entire alien troop movement using nothing more than microscopic environmental changes. Particle analysis, soil composition, quantum-level tracking, all combined into a comprehensive understanding of alien movement that went beyond traditional reconnaissance. Dr. Chen's computational models transformed this information into something weaponizable, not through direct conflict but through environmental manipulation. They would create cascading systemic failures that would make the alien invasion unsustainable. "We're not soldiers," she explained to the team. "We're ecosystem engineers." In the Amazon rainforest, another team used similar techniques. Captured alien atmospheric modification technology was being repurposed to create localized environmental conditions that would systematically disrupt alien operations. Not by fighting, but by making their environment unlivable. The Zarkonians had come expecting a traditional conquest. Instead, they found themselves fighting against an entire planet that was actively resisting them at every ecological, technological, and computational level. William Jarrah's team represented the pinnacle of this new form of warfare. Indigenous, tracking knowledge combined with quantum computing. Environmental science merged with military strategy. Global collaboration transformed into a living, breathing defense mechanism. As the sun set over the Australian outback, William watched the holographic display. Complex networks of information pulsed like living organisms. Alien supply lines began to show the first signs of systematic collapse. "We're not just defending," he said quietly. "We're redesigning the entire concept of planetary survival." The counterattack had begun, and the Zarkonians had no idea what was coming. Admiral Kralix watched the holographic displays with a growing sense of something alien to their species: fear. The Zarkonian command center was a marvel of technological precision. Quantum state processors hummed with computational power that could analyze entire planetary systems in microseconds. Millions of neural interfaces connected every command node, creating a perfect, mathematically optimized communication network, and it was falling apart. What had begun as a simple planetary conquest had transformed into something incomprehensible. The human resistance wasn't just fighting. They were systematically deconstructing the very philosophical foundations of the Zarkonian Imperium. A junior analysis drone approached, its neural interfaces twitching with barely contained panic. Quantum communication networks are experiencing unprecedented fracture patterns, it reported. The words were precise. The underlying emotion was not. The humans had done something impossible. They had weaponized communication itself. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. A team of linguists, cultural anthropologists, and quantum communication specialists had discovered something profound about the Zarkonian neural network. It wasn't just a communication system. It was a philosophical framework, a living manifestation of the Imperium's collective consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, standing in a research facility that now looked more like a cross between a quantum physics lab and a linguistic research center, explained it to her team. They don't just communicate, she said, pointing to complex holographic representations of Zarkonian communication patterns. They are their communication. Every transmission is simultaneously a message and a reinforcement of their collective identity. Major Jack Chen, working alongside her, had weaponized this insight. They had created a communication virus. But virus was too simple a word. It was a philosophical infection, a systemic deconstruction of the Zarkonian understanding of reality. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning, linguistic patterns that seemed random, but contained deep, mathematically complex undermining of the Zarkonian neural framework, cultural references that would be meaningless to an alien intelligence but would create computational feedback loops that would gradually destabilize their entire communication infrastructure. The first signs of collapse were subtle, Zarkonian. Battle units began to experience synchronization failures. Communication nodes started to generate what could only be described as philosophical contradictions. The perfect, mathematically optimized system was developing what could only be called cognitive dissonance. Admiral Kralix watched as entire fleet communication networks began to fragment. "This is impossible," the Admiral muttered, a phrase that was becoming increasingly common. The human team had done more than create a communication disruption. They had discovered the fundamental weakness in the Zarkonian philosophical infrastructure. Absolute efficiency was itself a vulnerability. A team of indigenous Australian linguists had been crucial to the breakthrough. Their understanding of language as a living, adaptive system, not just a communication tool but a way of understanding reality, proved to be the key. Language isn't just words, Dr. Miriam Talbot, a linguistic anthropologist, explained. It's a way of creating reality. And their reality is built on a foundation we can systematically dismantle. The communication attack was multi-layered. Quantum encrypted messages that carried multiple simultaneous meanings. Cultural references that would create computational feedback loops. Linguistic patterns that introduced philosophical contradictions into the most fundamental communication networks. In the Zarkonian command center, neural interfaces began to generate what could only be described as philosophical error messages. "We are experiencing," one communication node reported, "a fundamental recalibration of existential parameters," which was, of course, precisely the point. Admiral Kralix watched as the perfectly optimized system began to develop what could only be described as uncertainty. The humans hadn't just found a way to fight. They had found a way to make the Zarkonians question their entire understanding of reality. And in that moment of questioning lay the most dangerous weapon of all. As the first communication networks began to fragment, Admiral Kralix understood something profound. This was no longer a war. This was a philosophical dismantling, and the Zarkonian Imperium was losing. The first human interstellar mission launched from a place of transformation, not triumph. Q. Starship Horizon wasn't a military vessel. It wasn't a weapon of conquest. It was a testament to everything humanity had become during the invasion. Captain Elena Rodriguez, daughter of the quantum physicist who had been crucial in humanity's defense, stood on the bridge. Behind her, a crew that defied every traditional concept of national or cultural boundaries. Specialists from every continent, every background, every possible human experience. Transmission ready, announced Dr. Akira Tanaka, the ship's chief communication officer. His station was a marvel of integrated technologies, captured alien communication arrays modified by human innovation, quantum entanglement communication, systems that could transmit information across impossible distances. The broadcast would be sent across multiple galactic communication bands, not a declaration of war, not a threat, but a message. We are here. Aboard the Zarkonian flagship, the surviving members of the invasion fleet watched the transmission. Admiral Kralix, demoted but still alive, understood the true nature of defeat. The human transmission wasn't just information, it was an invitation, a challenge, a reimagining of what first contact could mean. We do not come to conquer, the message began. We come to understand. Those simple words carried multiple layers of meaning, linguistic complexity that would take decades to fully decode, mathematical patterns that suggested multiple simultaneous interpretations, a communication strategy that was simultaneously an act of diplomacy, scientific exploration, and philosophical provocation. The crew of the Horizon represented humanity's transformation. Dr. Miriam Talbot, the linguistic anthropologist, stood beside the ship's quantum navigation systems. Her presence alone was a statement. Pure scientific understanding was as crucial as technological capability. Indigenous trackers worked alongside quantum physicists. Climate scientists collaborated with communication specialists. The boundaries between disciplines had dissolved during the invasion, and this ship was their living testament. We're not just exploring space, Captain Rodriguez told her crew during the final pre-launch briefing. We're exploring what it means to be human. The ship's systems were a hybrid of captured alien technology and human innovation. Quantum drives that could manipulate spacetime. Communication arrays that could transmit information through multiple dimensional states. Navigation systems that incorporated ecological understanding alongside pure mathematical calculation. Zix-7, the junior data analyst who had first noticed something unusual about Earth during the initial survey, watched the transmission from a research facility. The young Zarkonian analyst had been transformed by the encounter with humanity. No longer a simple data processor, but something more. A witness to a fundamental transformation of understanding. The Horizon's mission wasn't just exploration, it was communication. Every system, every protocol, every piece of technology was designed not just to gather information, but to facilitate understanding. We learned something from you, the transmission continued. A phrase that was simultaneously a diplomatic overture, a scientific statement and a philosophical provocation. Other civilizations were watching. The galactic communication networks, which had been monitoring the conflict, were analyzing every millisecond of the transmission. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was redefining the very concept of first contact. The launch was silent. No massive rockets, no violent departure, just a quantum shift in spacetime, and the Horizon simply was no longer there. Admiral Kralix received a final communication, not a threat, not a celebration of victory, but something far more profound, a quantum encrypted file, millions of lines of data, scientific observations, cultural records, a comprehensive record of human experience during the invasion, a gift. We do not seek revenge, the final transmission read. We seek understanding. As the Horizon vanished into the depths of space, Humanity had transformed from a planet under invasion to something else entirely, a civilization ready to meet the universe on its own terms.